behind the golden gates of Kensington Palace, where photographers chase every smile and the world watches every step, a 9-year-old princess discovered something that would shake the very foundation of everything she believed about her family. Princess Charlotte's innocent question to her father one October evening would uncover a web of whispered lies, hidden jealousies, and carefully orchestrated attacks that had been poisoning her mother's reputation for months. What started as bedtime confusion about cruel comments she overheard at school would lead Prince William down a dark path of discovery, revealing how those closest to the royal family had been systematically destroying Princess Catherine's image from within. The truth was more shocking than any tabloid headline, and the betrayal cut deeper than any public scandal. This is the story of how a child's tears exposed the carefully hidden conspiracy that threatened to tear apart one of the world's most watched families, and how a father's determination to protect his family led to revelations that would change the British royal family forever. As the autumn rain drummed against the tall windows of apartment 1A at Kensington Palace, creating a rhythm that seemed to match the restless energy of 9-year-old Princess Charlotte as she sat cross-legged on her bedroom carpet. Her school uniform lay crumpled in the corner, where she had tossed it after returning from Lambrook School, and her usually bright eyes held a shadow that hadn't been there that morning. Prince William knocked gently on her door before entering, carrying a cup of hot chocolate topped with marshmallows, just the way Charlotte liked it. The sight of his daughter sitting so quietly, without her usual chatter about her day, immediately caught his attention. Bursting with stories about her classes, her friends, and the small adventures that filled her school days. "How was school today, sweetheart?" William asked, settling beside her on the soft carpet. He had changed out of his formal attire into comfortable jeans and a navy sweater, wanting to be completely present for their evening routine. Charlotte accepted the hot chocolate but didn't drink it immediately. Instead, she stared into the swirling marshmallows as if they might provide answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. The silence stretched between them, unusual for a child who normally filled every quiet moment with words. "Papa," she finally said, her voice smaller than usual, "what does social climber mean?" William felt something cold settle in his stomach. Day. The term wasn't one a 9-year-old should know, let alone be asking about. He chose his words carefully, sensing this wasn't a casual question born from curiosity about vocabulary. "Well, it's not a very nice thing to say about someone," he replied gently. "It means someone who tries very hard to be friends with important people just to make themselves look better." "But why do you ask, Charlotte? Did you hear that somewhere?" Charlotte's fingers tightened around her mug, and William noticed her lower lip trembling slightly. She was fighting back tears, trying to be brave in that way children do when they're confused by the adult world around them. "Some girls at school were talking," she whispered. "They said mean things about Mama. They said she was a social climber who only married you to be a princess. They said she doesn't really belong in our family." The words hit William like a physical blow. These flared immediately, but he forced himself to remain calm for Charlotte's sake. She was watching his face carefully, trying to understand why other children would say such hurtful things about the mother she adored. "And what did you say to them?" William asked, though his jaw was already tightening with suppressed anger. "I told them they were lying," Charlotte said, her voice growing stronger with the memory of defending her mother. "I told them Mama is the best person in the whole world and that she loves us more than anything. But then they laughed at me, Papa. They said everyone knows it's true. Even the adults are talking about it." William pulled Charlotte closer, wrapping his arms around her small frame. He could feel her trembling slightly, not from cold but from the confusion and hurt that came from having her family attacked by her peers. The protective fury building in his chest was something he hadn't felt since his own childhood, when he had to navigate similar cruel comments about his parents' marriage. "Listen to me very carefully, Charlotte," he said, his voice steady and warm despite the storm brewing inside him. "Your mother is the most genuine, caring person I've ever known. She married me because we love each other, not for any other reason. Those girls don't know anything about our family or about Mama's heart." Charlotte pulled back to look at her father's face, searching for the reassurance she desperately needed. But why would they say those things if they aren't true? And how do they even know words like that? This was the question that troubled William most. 9-year-old girls didn't typically use terms like social climber unless they had heard adults discussing such topics. The specificity of the accusations suggested this wasn't playground gossip, but something more organized and deliberate. Sometimes, sweetheart, people say unkind things when they're jealous or when they've heard rumors that aren't true, he explained. But I need to ask you something important, B. Have you heard these kinds of comments before? At school or anywhere else? Charlotte nodded slowly, and William's heart sank further. B. The girls have been saying things for a few weeks now. At first it was just little comments about how Mama wasn't born a princess like Great-Granny was. But then it got meaner. They started saying she was fake and that she pretends to care about poor people just for photos. The detail and consistency of these attacks alarmed William. This wasn't random childhood cruelty, but seemed to follow specific talking points that were being circulated somewhere. The fact that it had been going on for weeks without Charlotte mentioning it suggested she had been trying to handle it alone, protecting both her mother and him from the hurt. "Why didn't you tell us about this before?" he asked gently, already knowing the answer would break his heart. "I didn't want to make Mama sad," Charlotte admitted, tears finally spilling over. "She's been so busy with her work helping children, and she always smiles when she comes home even when she looks tired. I didn't want her to know that people are saying mean things about her." Here, William felt his chest tighten with pride and pain in equal measure. His 9-year-old daughter had been carrying this burden alone, trying to protect her mother's feelings while defending her family's honor at school. The maturity and love she was showing made the attacks on Catherine feel even more vicious. "Charlotte, you never have to protect us from knowing what's happening to you," he said firmly. "We're a family, which means we handle difficult things together. You did the right thing by defending Mama, but you should have told us so we could help." As he held his daughter and felt her finally relaxing against him, William's mind was already racing ahead to darker questions. How were these specific talking points reaching children? Who was spreading rumors detailed enough that 9-year-olds could repeat sophisticated criticisms about Catherine's background and motivations? "Papa," Charlotte said, interrupting his thoughts, "is it true that some people in our own family don't like Mama?" The question struck William like lightning. This wasn't something a child would think to ask unless she had heard something specific. The implication that the attacks might be coming from within their own circles, possibly even from within the royal family itself, was something he hadn't considered but now seemed terrifyingly possible. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" he said, trying to keep his voice neutral while his mind raced through possibilities. "One of the girls said her mummy heard it from someone who works with our family," Charlotte said quietly. "She said there are people close to us who think Mama isn't good enough for you." William closed his eyes briefly, processing the implications. If palace staff or royal family members were feeding negative information about Catherine to their social circles, and if that information was making its way to other parents and eventually to their children, then this wasn't just playground bullying. This was a systematic campaign to undermine his wife's reputation, and it was coming from inside their own world. "Charlotte, I want you to know that Mama and I love each other very much, and we love you and your brothers more than anything in the world," he said. "Some people might not understand that or they might be jealous, but that doesn't make their opinions important. What matters is what's true, and the truth is that our family is strong and filled with love." Charlotte nodded, seeming to find comfort in her father's certainty. But William could see that the damage had been done. An optimistic recital, that there weren't a cacket between the protest and the crew, and fighting in a turning to turn past across the field. "Will you tell Mama?" Charlotte asked, and William could hear the worry in her voice. She was still trying to protect her mother even while seeking reassurance for herself. "I'll handle this, sweetheart," William promised. "Mama doesn't need to worry about what some people are saying. But I need you to promise me something. If anyone says anything else mean about our family, I want you to tell me right away. Don't try to handle it by yourself." Charlotte agreed, and William helped her get ready for bed, reading her favorite story about a brave princess who fought dragons and always protected the people she loved. But as he kissed her goodnight and turned off her bedroom light, his mind was already shifting into a different mode entirely. Walking back to his own room, William found Catherine at her dressing table, removing her jewelry after a long day of royal engagements. She looked beautiful but tired, and the sight of her peaceful expression made his anger burn even hotter. She had no idea that while she was out working tirelessly for various charities and causes, people were systematically poisoning public opinion against her. "Today?" Catherine asked, noticing his expression in the mirror. She seemed a bit quiet at dinner. William made a decision in that moment. He wouldn't burden Catherine with the details of what Charlotte had endured until he had more information about who was behind it, but he would find out who was spreading these rumors and why. The attack on his wife was also an attack on his daughter's sense of security and trust in the world around them. She had a long day at school, he said simply. Nothing we can't handle. But as Catherine continued her bedtime routine, chatting about her day and the people she had met, William was already planning his investigation. Someone close to them was betraying Catherine, feeding her enemies ammunition to use against her. They were doing it systematically and strategically, and they were doing it in a way that was now affecting his children. The next morning, William began making discreet inquiries. He started with Charlotte's school, requesting a meeting with her teacher under the pretense of checking on her academic progress. Mrs. Henderson, Charlotte's form teacher, was surprised by the unexpected request but welcomed the chance to discuss one of her most beloved students. "Princess Charlotte is absolutely delightful," Mrs. Henderson said as they sat in her classroom after school hours. "She's bright, kind to her classmates, and shows real leadership qualities. Is there something specific you'd like to discuss?" "I'm wondering about the social dynamics in her class," William said carefully. "Has she mentioned any issues with other students? Perhaps comments about our family?" Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted slightly, and William could see recognition in her eyes. "Actually, I have noticed some tension recently. A few of the girls have been making comments that seem quite sophisticated for their age. Comments about royal protocol and, well, about the Princess of Wales's background." "What kind of comments specifically?" William pressed. "Things about whether certain people deserve their positions, whether some members of the royal family are more legitimate than others," Mrs. Henderson said uncomfortably. "The language they're using suggests they're repeating things they've heard adults say. It's not typical playground conversation." William felt his suspicions confirmed. This wasn't organic childhood gossip, but adult opinions being transmitted through family conversations and social circles. "Have you spoken to the other parents about this?" he asked. "I've considered it, but frankly, Your Royal Highness, I'm not sure how to approach it without creating more drama," Mrs. Henderson admitted. "Some of these families move in very elite circles, and I suspect the comments originate from their social gatherings and dinner parties. Elite circles that intersected with royal society." William thanked Mrs. Henderson and left the school with a clearer picture forming in his mind. The attacks on Catherine weren't random or even primarily media-driven. They were coming from within the aristocratic and royal-adjacent social circles that his family moved through every day. That evening, he called his private secretary and arranged for a few discreet conversations with trusted friends who attended the same social events as other royal families and aristocratic circles. He needed to know what was being said about Catherine in private gatherings, and more importantly, who was saying it. The conversations that followed over the next few days painted a disturbing picture. Catherine was being discussed at dinner parties and social gatherings with a level of criticism and speculation that went far beyond normal royal commentary. The comments were detailed, personal, and often cruel, suggesting insider knowledge of private family matters that shouldn't have been public knowledge. One friend, Lady Sarah Marchmont, who had known William since childhood, was particularly forthcoming during a private lunch they shared at a discreet restaurant in Mayfair. "William, I have to tell you, there have been some very unpleasant conversations about Catherine lately," she said, looking uncomfortable but determined to be honest. "People are questioning everything from her motives for marrying you to her qualifications for royal duties. But here's what's troubling me most. The people making these comments seem to have information that only someone very close to your family would know." "What kind of information?" William asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Details about private conversations, her reactions to certain situations, even things about how she interacts with staff when she thinks no one is watching," Lady Sarah explained. "Someone is definitely feeding information to people who then use it to build these narratives about her character." William felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a clearer picture. Someone with intimate access to their family life was systematically undermining Catherine by sharing private moments and twisting them into ammunition for her critics. The betrayal was more personal and more deliberate than he had initially imagined. As he sat in his study that night, staring out at the gardens of Kensington Palace, William realized that his investigation was just beginning. Charlotte's innocent question had uncovered something much darker and more complex than schoolyard bullying. By someone they trusted, someone who smiled at them daily and pretended to support their family, was working methodically to destroy Catherine's reputation and, by extension, the stability of their family. The truth would be more shocking than he could have imagined, and the betrayal would cut deeper than any public attack ever could. But for Charlotte's sake, for Catherine's sake, and for the sake of their family's future, he would uncover every detail of the conspiracy against them, no matter where the trail led or whom it implicated. The game was only just beginning. Attic began with the methodical precision of someone who understood that royal scandals could destroy lives in centuries-old institutions. Over the next 2 weeks, he quietly reached out to contacts across London's elite social circles, always under the pretense of casual friendship or routine royal business. What he discovered sent chills down his spine. The campaign against Catherine wasn't random gossip or typical royal criticism. It was coordinated, strategic, and frighteningly effective. But he had dinner parties in Belgravia, charity galas in Mayfair, and weekend gatherings at country estates. The same talking points kept appearing in conversation after conversation. Catherine was being systematically painted as an outsider who didn't understand royal duty, a manipulator who had orchestrated her relationship with William for personal gain, and a commoner who was diminishing the mystique and dignity of the monarchy. Sir Marcus Pemberton, an old family friend who had served in various diplomatic roles, provided William with particularly disturbing details during a private breakfast at White's Club. Marcus had been reluctant to share what he knew, but William's direct questions had left him no choice. "It's not just casual conversation anymore, William," Marcus said, stirring his coffee nervously. "There are people actively working to discredit Catherine. They're sharing stories that seem designed to make her look calculating or inappropriate. The level of detail suggests these stories are coming from someone who has regular access to your family's private life." "What kinds of stories?" William asked, though he was beginning to dread the answers. "Things like how she supposedly reacts when cameras aren't rolling. Claims about her being demanding with staff, suggestions that she's more interested in the celebrity aspects of royal life than the duty," Marcus explained. "But here's what's most concerning. Whoever is spreading these stories knows intimate details about your daily routines, your children's schedules, even private conversations between you and Catherine." William felt his blood run cold. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just someone with general access to royal events or public information. This was someone who was either present during private family moments or was receiving detailed reports from someone who was. "Marcus, I need you to be completely honest with me," William said. "Who have you heard making these comments? And more importantly, who seems to be the original source?" Marcus hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with naming names. "William, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear. But the most detailed and damaging stories seem to trace back to someone within the royal household itself. Not staff, but family." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. William had suspected that the attacks might be coming from within their circles, but the possibility that a family member was actively working to destroy Catherine's reputation was almost too painful to consider.
"Do you have any idea who?" William pressed.
"I can't be certain," Marcus said carefully. "But the conversations I've witnessed, that contain the most specific details about Catherine's private behavior, all seem to stem from the same source network. People who attend the same social functions, move in the same circles, and all seem to have heard similar stories from someone they consider a reliable authority on royal family dynamics." William thanked Marcus and left the club with his mind racing. That afternoon, he made a decision that went against every instinct about privacy and discretion that had been drilled into him since childhood. He contacted a private security firm that specialized in digital investigations and social media monitoring. David Chen was the firm's lead digital investigator, a former intelligence officer who had transitioned into private consulting work. When William met him at a secure location in central London, David had already begun preliminary research based on the limited information William had provided over an encrypted phone call. "Your Royal Highness, what I've found so far is quite sophisticated," David said, opening a laptop filled with screenshots and data analysis. "There's definitely a coordinated campaign targeting the Princess of Wales across multiple social media platforms, but this isn't typical trolling or random negativity. Someone is orchestrating this with real strategic thinking." David's screen showed charts and graphs that looked more like military intelligence briefings than social media reports. There were timelines showing when negative posts about Catherine spiked, analysis of which hashtags were being promoted, and most disturbingly, evidence of sock puppet accounts that were spreading identical talking points across different platforms. The timing is too precise to be organic, David continued. Negative content about the princess appears in coordinated waves, often coinciding with her public appearances or charitable work. Someone is actively working to undermine positive coverage of her activities. Can you trace the source? William asked. That's where it gets interesting, David said, pulling up another screen. Many of the most effective attacks originate from accounts that appear to be run by people with insider knowledge of royal protocols and private information. They're not just criticizing her public appearances, they're making claims about her private behavior and motivations that suggest access to confidential information. Third, William leaned forward, studying the data. What kind of private information? Details about her daily schedule before it's made public. Claims about private conversations with staff. Even commentary on her personal relationships within the royal family, David explained. Whoever is feeding information to these accounts has intimate access to your family's private life. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Someone close to them was systematically feeding private information to people who were using it to destroy Catherine's reputation online and in social circles. The digital attacks were then filtering into real-world conversations, eventually reaching even the parents of Charlotte's classmates. There's something else, David said, his expression growing more serious. I've identified what appears to be a central coordination point for much of this activity. There's one particular social media account that seems to be the original source for many of the most damaging claims about the Princess of Wales. This account has connections to several high-profile royal commentators and gossip accounts. Can you identify who runs it? William asked. The account is registered under a false name and uses sophisticated privacy protection, David admitted. But I can tell you this, based on the timing of posts and the type of information being shared, whoever runs this account has real-time access to your family's private activities. They're posting information that sometimes appears online before it's even been reported through official royal channels. William felt sick. Betrayal was more comprehensive than he had imagined. Someone wasn't just spreading gossip about Catherine. They were actively monitoring their family's private life and weaponizing that information against her. Picture. I need you to keep investigating, William told David. Find out who's behind this, no matter what it takes. Over the following days, William began paying closer attention to the people around them. During royal engagements, family dinners, and private meetings, he watched for anyone who seemed to be taking unusual interest in private conversations or family dynamics. He started varying their routines and sharing different information with different people to see what would surface online. The results were chilling. Data, information that he shared with only certain family members would appear in online attacks against Catherine within hours. Details about their private conversations would be twisted and used as evidence of her allegedly manipulative character. Even tender moments between them that should have been completely private were being distorted and weaponized. Catherine noticed his increased vigilance and questioned him about it one evening as they prepared for bed. She had been having an increasingly difficult time with negative coverage, and William could see the toll it was taking on her confidence and joy in her royal duties. You've been different lately, she said, sitting on their bed and studying his face. More watchful. What's going on, William? Is there something I should know? William sat beside her, taking her hands in his. He had been trying to protect her from the full extent of what he was discovering, but he realized she deserved to know the truth about what they were facing. Catherine, I've been investigating the source of some of the negative coverage you've been receiving, he said carefully. It's not just media criticism or random online trolling. Someone is actively working to damage your reputation, and they're using private information about our family to do it. Catherine's face paled. What do you mean, private information? Details about our daily life, conversations that should be confidential, even information about how you interact with staff and family when you think no one is watching, William explained. Someone close to us is feeding this information to people who are using it to attack you online and in social circles. Catherine sat in stunned silence for several moments, processing the implications. Do you think someone in our family or household is betraying us? I know it sounds impossible, but the evidence is overwhelming, William said. The level of detail in these attacks, the timing of when information appears online, the sophistication of the campaign, this isn't random hatred or jealousy. This is organized and deliberate. Catherine stood and walked to their bedroom window, looking out at the gardens that had become her sanctuary over the years they had lived at Kensington Palace. "Well, who would it be?" she asked quietly. "Who would want to hurt our family like this?" "I don't know yet," William admitted, "but I'm going to find out." The next morning brought a breakthrough that William had been both hoping for and dreading. David Chen called with urgent news about the social media investigation. "Your Royal Highness, I've made a significant discovery," David said when William answered his secure phone. "I've been able to trace the IP address of several posts that contain highly confidential information about your family. The posts originated from a device that was connected to the Kensington Palace wireless network." William felt his blood turn to ice. "You're certain?" "Absolutely certain," David confirmed. "Whoever is coordinating these attacks against the Princess of Wales is doing it from within Kensington Palace itself. They have regular access to your residence and are using your own internet connection to spread malicious information about your family." The betrayal was complete and devastating. Someone who smiled at them every day, who sat at their table and shared in their private moments, who had access to their home and their trust, was systematically working to destroy Catherine's reputation and their family's happiness. "There's more," David continued. "I've identified the specific device being used for many of these posts. It's a smartphone that's been accessing your wireless network regularly over the past 6 months. If you can identify who has that level of access to your home, you'll have your answer." William thanked David and ended the call, his mind racing through possibilities. Who had regular access to Kensington Palace? Who would be present during private family moments? Who would have intimate knowledge of their daily routines and private conversations? The list of possibilities was shorter than he had expected, but each name on it represented a devastating betrayal of trust that would forever change how their family functioned. Someone they loved and trusted was their enemy, working from within their own home to destroy everything they had built together. As William prepared to take the next step in his investigation, he realized that uncovering the truth might be more painful than living with the uncertainty, but for Charlotte's sake, for Catherine's sake, and for the future of their family, he had to know who was betraying them. The evidence was leading him toward a confrontation that would shatter their family's sense of security forever. But there was no turning back now. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only path to protecting the people he loved most in the world. The technical evidence from David Chen had narrowed the suspects down to a handful of people with regular access to Kensington Palace's private quarters, over cross-referencing their movements. With the timing of online attacks against Catherine, the answer, when it finally became clear, was more devastating than anything he could have imagined. William decided to set a trap. He would share specific, fabricated information with different suspects and see what surfaced online. It was a strategy that went against every instinct he had about family loyalty and trust. But the systematic destruction of his wife's reputation demanded extraordinary measures. On a Tuesday morning in November, during what appeared to be a casual family breakfast, William mentioned to the gathered family that Catherine was considering stepping back from certain royal duties because she was feeling overwhelmed by negative public perception. It was completely untrue, but he presented it as a genuine concern they were discussing privately. "She's been quite affected by some of the recent coverage," he said, watching faces carefully around the breakfast table. "We're thinking she might benefit from a lower profile for a few months while things settle down." The reactions were varied but seemed appropriately supportive. Everyone expressed sympathy for Catherine and anger at the media treatment she had been receiving. If William hadn't been looking for it, he might have missed the flash of satisfaction that crossed one person's face before being quickly replaced by the expected expression of concern. By Thursday afternoon, David Chen was calling with confirmation of William's worst fears. The House of Wales, considering stepping back from royal duties, appeared online this morning, David reported. "It's being presented as insider knowledge from someone close to the royal family. The post originated from the same device we've been tracking." William's hands were shaking as he held the phone. "And you're certain about the device identification?" "I've cross-referenced the wireless connection logs with the timing of the posts," David confirmed. "The device belongs to someone who was present at Kensington Palace during your breakfast gathering on Tuesday morning. The post went live approximately 18 hours after your conversation, which matches the pattern we've observed with previous leaks." The trap had worked, but the result brought William no satisfaction. person betraying their family wasn't a distant relative or ambitious courtier seeking favor elsewhere. It was someone who sat at their breakfast table, who knew their children's bedtime stories, who had been trusted with the most intimate details of their daily lives. "Sir, there's something else," David continued. "I've done a deeper analysis of the social media networks spreading these stories, and the coordination goes back much further than we initially realized. This campaign against the Princess of Wales has been building for over a year, with the most damaging content appearing right before major royal events or charitable initiatives she's involved with." William closed his eyes, processing the implications. This wasn't a recent development triggered by jealousy or a single incident. Someone had been methodically working to undermine Catherine's reputation for more than a year, timing their attacks for maximum damage to her public work and royal duties. "Can you document everything?" William asked. "I'm going to need comprehensive evidence before I can act on this." "Already done, sir," David replied. "I have timestamps, IP addresses, device identification, and a complete timeline showing the correlation between private information and public attacks. The evidence is undeniable." That evening, William made the most difficult phone call of his life. He contacted his private secretary and requested a complete security review of Kensington Palace, including digital monitoring of all devices connected to their wireless network. He also asked for a private meeting with the head of royal protection to discuss internal security threats. The meeting took place in a secure room at St. James Palace, away from the usual royal residences where conversations might be overheard. Commander James Whitfield, head of royal protection, listened to William's evidence with growing alarm and anger. "Your Royal Highness, what you're describing represents a serious breach of internal security," Commander Whitfield said after reviewing David Chen's documentation. "If someone within your household is systematically leaking private information, they pose a threat not just to your family's privacy, but potentially to your physical security as well." "What's our next step?" William asked. "We'll implement immediate digital monitoring of all devices within Kensington Palace," Commander Whitfield replied. "But more importantly, we need to identify and confront the individual responsible. Based on the evidence you've provided, I believe we can do this quite definitively." The plan they developed was straightforward, but emotionally devastating for William. They would monitor all digital activity from Kensington Palace over the following week, while William shared different pieces of sensitive information with different family members. When the betrayer revealed themselves through their online activity, they would be confronted with irrefutable evidence. The week that followed was agony for William. He had to pretend normalcy while watching every conversation and interaction for signs of betrayal. Catherine noticed his tension but attributed it to work stress, offering support and encouragement that made his heart ache knowing what he was about to reveal. Charlotte, meanwhile, had been experiencing renewed problems at school. The rumors about Catherine had intensified rather than diminished, and William realized this was connected to the ongoing campaign against his wife. Someone was feeding fresh ammunition to the social circles that eventually reached even 9-year-old children. "Papa, they're saying Mama might not be a princess much longer," Charlotte confided during another bedtime conversation. "They say she's going to leave because she doesn't really want to do royal work." William felt rage building in his chest. The fabricated story he had planted as a trap was now being used to torment his daughter at school. The betrayer wasn't just attacking Catherine. They were using lies to upset his children and destabilize his family's emotional security. "That's completely untrue, Charlotte," he said firmly. "Mama loves her royal work and she loves our family. She's not going anywhere, and she's definitely still a princess. Some people like to spread lies because it makes them feel important." But privately, William was plotting the confrontation that would end this campaign of destruction once and for all. The breakthrough came on Friday afternoon. David Chen's monitoring equipment detected a series of posts originating from within Kensington Palace that contained information William had shared with only one person the previous day. The digital evidence was accompanied by physical security footage showing the individual using their phone immediately after receiving the sensitive information. "We have them," Commander Whitfield informed William during an urgent call. "The evidence is comprehensive and undeniable. We know who's been betraying your family." William requested the confrontation take place on Sunday evening, after Charlotte and her brothers had been put to bed. He wanted to minimize their exposure to what he knew would be a devastating family crisis. Catherine would need to be present, both as a victim of the betrayal and as someone who deserved to hear the truth directly. On Sunday afternoon, William struggled to maintain normal family activities while preparing mentally for the evening's confrontation. They attended church services, had lunch together, and played with the children in the palace gardens. The normalcy felt surreal, knowing that their family dynamic was about to be shattered forever. As evening approached, William found himself studying the face of the person who had been systematically destroying Catherine's reputation while smiling at them across the dinner table. A betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that he could barely comprehend the level of deception that had been required to maintain it for over a year. Catherine noticed his distraction during dinner and pulled him aside afterward while the children were occupied with their evening activities. "William, you've been different all week," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Whatever it is, we can face it together, but I need to know what's happening. After the children are in bed," he promised. "I'll explain everything then." At 8 o'clock, with Charlotte and her brothers safely asleep in their rooms, William asked everyone to gather in the main sitting room of their apartment. He had requested Commander Whitfield to be present with the digital evidence, and David Chen was connected via secure video link to present his findings. Catherine sensed the gravity of the situation immediately. "William, what's going on?" she asked. "Catherine, we need to discuss the campaign that's been waged against you over the past year," William said, his voice steady despite the emotional turmoil he was feeling. "I've discovered who's been systematically leaking private information about our family and using it to damage your reputation." The room fell silent. Catherine looked confused and concerned, while other family members present seemed puzzled by the formal tone and security presence. "I've spent the past month investigating the source of the negative coverage you've been receiving," William continued. "What I discovered is that someone very close to us has been deliberately and methodically working to undermine you, feeding private information to people who use it to attack you online and in social circles." William nodded to Commander Whitfield, who began presenting the digital evidence. Screenshots of social media posts, timestamps showing when information was leaked, and IP address traces that led directly back to Kensington Palace appeared on a large screen. "The person responsible has access to our private conversations, our daily routines, and intimate details about our family life," William said. "They've been using this access to provide ammunition to your critics for over a year." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth as she realized the implications. "Someone in our family has been doing this? The evidence is undeniable," Commander Whitfield said professionally. "We've been monitoring digital activity from all devices connected to your wireless network, and we've identified the specific individual responsible." William looked directly at the betrayer, watching as understanding dawned in their eyes. The game was over, and they knew it. "We set a trap," William said quietly. "I shared false information with you on Tuesday about Catherine considering stepping back from royal duties. That fabricated information appeared online within 24 hours, posted from your device while you were connected to our wireless network. The silence in the room was deafening." Catherine stared in shock as the truth became clear, while other family members looked between William and the accused with growing horror and disbelief. "Moreover, we have over a year's worth of evidence showing the same pattern," William continued. "Private information shared with you appears online in attacks against Catherine within hours or days. You've been systematically betraying our family's trust and using it to destroy my wife's reputation. The confrontation that followed would forever change their family." The betrayer's motivations, when finally revealed, would be more shocking than the betrayal itself, involving jealousy, rivalry, and a calculated attempt to force Catherine out of the royal family entirely. The truth was finally about to be exposed, but the cost to their family's sense of security and trust would take years to repair. The silence that followed William's accusation stretched for what felt like eternity. Catherine sat frozen in her chair, her face pale as she processed the reality that someone she trusted had been systematically working to destroy her reputation for over a year. The betrayer, confronted with undeniable evidence, seemed to deflate before their eyes. "I suppose there's no point in denying it anymore," came the quiet response that confirmed William's worst fears. The voice belonged to someone who had shared countless family meals with them, who had celebrated birthdays and holidays at their table, who had held their children and been trusted with their most private moments. Catherine's gasp echoed through the room. "How could you?" she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "To us, to our children. The betrayer's composure finally cracked. Years of hidden resentment and carefully controlled jealousy spilling out in a torrent of bitter words. 30. Do you really want to know why? They said, their voice rising with emotion. Because you never belonged here. Because you waltzed into this family with your perfect smile and your manufactured charm, and everyone fell for it. Because you made William forget who he really is and what this family represents. William stood up, his protective instincts flaring as he watched his wife being attacked so cruelly. That's enough, he said sharply. You don't get to justify what you've done with lies about Catherine's character. Lies? The betrayer laughed bitterly. Everything I shared was true. The way she calculated her way into your life, the way she plays the media game while pretending to be above it, the way she's turned you into someone who puts her feelings above your duty to the crown. I was trying to save this family from her influence. Catherine stood up shakily, her hands trembling as she faced her attacker. You destroyed my reputation, you hurt our children, you made me doubt myself and my place in this family, all because you decided I wasn't worthy. Her voice was steady but filled with pain. Who gave you the right to make that decision? I've been part of this family far longer than you have, came the defensive reply. I've seen what happens when the wrong people gain influence over future monarchs. I was protecting William and protecting the institution. Commander Whitfield stepped forward with additional evidence that made the betrayer's claims of noble motivation even more hollow. The timing of your attacks suggests a different motivation, he said professionally. You consistently targeted the Princess of Wales before major charitable events and public appearances, seemingly designed to undermine her confidence and effectiveness in her royal duties. David Chen's voice came through the secure video connection, adding damning details. The social media accounts you were feeding information to weren't concerned with protecting royal institutions. They were focused on personal attacks against the Princess of Wales, often using misogynistic language and imagery designed to shame and humiliate her. William pulled up examples on the screen, showing some of the most vicious online attacks that had stemmed from the leaked information. Catherine hadn't seen many of these before, and watching her face as she read the cruel comments broke William's heart all over again. You gave them ammunition to call her a gold digger, a social climber, a fake, William said, his voice thick with anger. Private moments and conversations so they could twist them into evidence of manipulation and calculation. You helped them paint her as everything she's not, but the betrayer's defensive facade was crumbling completely now. She is everything I said she was, they insisted desperately. She planned her way into this family from the beginning. Do you think it was a coincidence that she happened to be at St. Andrews? That she happened to be in your social circle? She orchestrated the entire relationship. Catherine was at St. Andrews because she earned her place there academically, William shot back. She was in my social circle because she was a fellow student, not because she was scheming to meet me. And even if she had been, which she wasn't, that wouldn't justify what you've done to our family. Catherine found her voice again, stronger now as anger replaced the initial shock and hurt. You sat at our dinner table and smiled at my children while secretly working to tear their family apart. You comforted me when I was upset about negative coverage that you had helped create. You pretended to care about my well-being while systematically destroying it. I did care, the betrayer said, but their words rang hollow. Palaces. I hoped you would realize you didn't belong and leave quietly. I thought if you understood how the public really felt about you, you'd step back from royal duties and let William focus on his real responsibilities. His real responsibilities include protecting and supporting his wife, William said coldly. Something you've made infinitely more difficult with your betrayal. Commander Whitfield presented the final piece of evidence that revealed the true scope of the betrayal. We've discovered that you were also sharing information with certain journalists and royal commentators who were critical of the Princess of Wales. You weren't just feeding social media trolls, you were providing inside information to legitimate media outlets that gave these attacks credibility. The revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. Some of the most hurtful newspaper articles and magazine pieces about her had been based on information provided by someone she trusted. The betrayer hadn't just been working with anonymous online accounts. They had been collaborating with professional media figures to create a comprehensive campaign of destruction. The article in last month's Telegraph about your alleged demanding behavior with staff, Commander Whitfield continued, originated from information you provided about a private conversation between the princess and her lady-in-waiting regarding event logistics. Catherine remembered the article clearly, It had painted her as imperious and unreasonable, twisting a simple discussion about scheduling into evidence of entitled behavior. Reading it had made her question herself and her interactions with staff for weeks afterward. And the piece in Tatler suggesting that you were more interested in celebrity status than charitable work, David Chen added via the video link, came from your leak of information about the princess's excitement over meeting certain high-profile supporters at charity events. Besides, as she realized how thoroughly she had been betrayed. Every private moment of joy or enthusiasm had been twisted and weaponized against her. Every normal human reaction had been reframed as evidence of shallow motivations. You didn't just share information, William said, his voice deadly quiet. You interpreted our private family moments in the most malicious way possible and handed them to people who were already looking for reasons to attack Catherine. You turned our love and happiness into ammunition for our enemies. The betrayer's last defense was a desperate appeal to family loyalty. I was trying to protect this family from making the same mistakes that nearly destroyed it in the past. I was trying to prevent another situation like with Diana, where the wrong influences and outside pressures led to disaster. The mention of William's mother was the final straw. Catherine gasped as if she'd been slapped, while William's face turned pale with rage. Don't you dare invoke my mother's memory to justify what you've done, William said, his voice shaking with emotion. My mother was destroyed by people who claimed to know what was best for her while they fed information to her enemies. You've done exactly the same thing to my wife. Different. The betrayer protested. No, they're not, William replied. You've systematically undermined Catherine's confidence, isolated her from potential allies, and provided her enemies with private information to use against her. You've recreated the same toxic environment that my mother endured, all while claiming to protect our family from it. Catherine stood up again, her composure returning as she found strength in her anger. You've spent over a year trying to convince the world that I'm a manipulative outsider who doesn't deserve my place in this family. But the only manipulator in this room is you. The only person who has systematically lied and schemed and betrayed trust is you. The confrontation was nearing its end, but the betrayer made one final attempt to justify their actions. Everything I did was because I love this family and want to protect it. Love doesn't destroy, Catherine said simply. Love doesn't tear down the people you claim to care about. Love doesn't weaponize private moments against the people who trust you. What you did wasn't love. It was cruelty disguised as concern. William nodded to Commander Whitfield, who stepped forward with official documentation. You will be removed from all royal households effective immediately, he announced. You will have no further contact with any members of the royal family, and you will sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement regarding anything you may have observed during your time with the family. All your electronic devices will be confiscated and examined, David Chen added. We need to ensure that no additional private information exists that could be used against the family in the future. The betrayer looked around the room one final time, seeming to finally understand the magnitude of what they had destroyed. I never wanted it to go this far, they said quietly. But you let it go this far, William replied. Every day for over a year, you made the choice to continue betraying us. Every time you saw Catherine upset by negative coverage that you had helped create, you chose to continue. Every time our children asked us about mean comments they heard at school, you chose to stay silent and let them suffer. Escorted the betrayer from Kensington Palace for the final time, William and Catherine were left alone to process the devastation that had been revealed. The person who had shared their most intimate family moments, who had been trusted with their children's well-being, who had sat at their table and pretended to love them, had spent over a year systematically working to destroy Catherine's reputation and destabilize their family. The immediate crisis was over, but the long-term work of healing from such a profound betrayal was only just beginning. Catherine would need to rebuild her confidence in her royal role. Their children would need to understand why someone they trusted had been removed from their lives, and their entire family would need to learn how to trust again after such a devastating violation of their most basic assumptions about loyalty and love. The truth was finally exposed, but the path to healing would be long and difficult for everyone involved. The weeks following the confrontation brought a strange mixture of relief and devastation to Kensington Palace. The attacks against Catherine stopped almost immediately, as if someone had turned off a tap that had been poisoning their lives for over a year. But the emotional aftermath of discovering such a profound betrayal within their own family proved more challenging to address than the external campaign had ever been. Catherine struggled most with rebuilding her confidence in her royal duties. For months, she had been second-guessing every public appearance, wondering if her genuine enthusiasm for charitable work was being perceived as attention-seeking, questioning whether her natural warmth with the public was being interpreted as calculating behavior. The knowledge that her private moments had been deliberately twisted and weaponized against her made her hesitant to be spontaneous or authentic in public settings. William watched his wife struggle with increasing concern. The woman who had once approached royal engagements with natural grace and genuine joy now seemed guarded and overly careful, as if she were afraid that any unscripted moment might be turned against her. "I keep wondering what else they shared that I don't know about," Catherine confided to William one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. "Every conversation we had, every private moment they witnessed, how much of our life did they turn into ammunition for my critics?" William took her hand, feeling the tension in her fingers. "David Chen has assured us that we've identified all the leaked information. The digital trail was comprehensive, and we know exactly what was shared and when. There are no more surprises waiting for us." "But that's not really the point, is it?" Catherine said quietly. "The point is that I can never again assume that our private family moments are actually private. How do we trust anyone new? How do we know this won't happen again?" It was a question that haunted both of them. Betrayer's removal had solved the immediate crisis, but it had also shattered their basic sense of security within their own home. Every new staff member, every family gathering, every private conversation now carried the weight of potential betrayal. Commander Whitfield had implemented comprehensive new security protocols for all royal households, including regular monitoring of digital activity and enhanced vetting procedures for anyone with access to private family areas. But William knew that technological solutions couldn't address the emotional damage that had been done. The most difficult conversation came when they had to explain the situation to Charlotte and her brothers. The children had noticed the sudden absence of someone who had been a regular presence in their lives, and they deserved an age-appropriate explanation of what had happened. William and Catherine chose to have this conversation in Charlotte's bedroom, the same place where the entire investigation had begun, with her innocent question about cruel comments at school. "You remember when you asked me about the mean things some children were saying about Mama?" William began, sitting on Charlotte's bed while she and her brothers gathered around. Charlotte nodded solemnly. At 9 years old, she had developed a more serious demeanor over the past few months, as if the adult problems swirling around their family had aged her beyond her years. "We discovered that someone we trusted was sharing private information about our family with people who were using it to be mean to Mama," Catherine explained gently. "That person isn't going to be around our family anymore." "Was it someone we knew well?" Charlotte asked, her intuition sharp as always. "Yes, sweetheart," William said. "It was someone we loved and trusted, which makes what they did even more hurtful. But the important thing for you to understand is that it wasn't your fault, it wasn't Mama's fault, and it's over now." Charlotte processed this information with the seriousness she had developed since the school incidents began. "Will the children at school stop saying mean things now?" "They should," Catherine said. "The person who was giving mean people information about us can't do that anymore." "But Charlotte, I need you to know that even if some people still say unkind things, that doesn't make them true. You know who Mama really is because you see me every day. You know how much I love you and Papa and your brothers." The children seemed to accept this explanation, but William could see that Charlotte was still processing deeper questions about trust and loyalty that she wasn't yet ready to articulate. The betrayal had affected their children's sense of security just as much as it had affected the adults. Over the following months, the family slowly began to heal. Catherine gradually regained her confidence in public appearances, helped by the notably more positive coverage she received once the coordinated attack stopped. The difference was so dramatic that it validated everything William had suspected about the campaign against her. Public opinion polls showed a significant improvement in Catherine's approval ratings, and charitable organizations reported increased enthusiasm for events she attended. It became clear that the negative perception of Catherine had been largely artificial, manufactured through the systematic campaign rather than reflecting genuine public sentiment. "It's remarkable," said Lady Sarah Marchmont during a lunch with William several months after the confrontation. "It's as if someone lifted a cloud that had been hanging over Catherine's public work. The change in how people respond to her is night and day." William nodded, though the validation brought him no satisfaction. "The damage that was done to her confidence and to our family's sense of security can't be undone by positive poll numbers. "How is Catherine really doing?" Lady Sarah asked with genuine concern. "Program. She's stronger than she was," William replied honestly, "but there's a guardedness now that wasn't there before. She's learned that even family can betray you, and that's a lesson that changes how you move through the world." The broader royal family also had to address the aftermath of the betrayal. Other family members who had been unaware of the campaign expressed shock and guilt about not recognizing what was happening. Some admitted they had occasionally wondered about the sources of negative stories about Catherine, but had never imagined that someone within their own circles was actively feeding information to critics. "I feel terrible that we didn't see it," one family member confided to William. "There were times when I wondered how certain publications seemed to know so much about private family matters, but I never suspected it was deliberate sabotage from within." The revelation forced the entire royal family to examine their assumptions about loyalty and trust. The renewed protocols were established for handling sensitive information, and there was a renewed emphasis on protecting each other from external attacks rather than allowing internal divisions to be exploited by outsiders. Most importantly, the experience brought William and Catherine closer together. Facing the betrayal as a united front had strengthened their partnership and their commitment to protecting their children from similar attacks in the future. "In a strange way, we're stronger now than we were before," Catherine reflected one evening as they watched Charlotte playing in the garden with her brothers. "We know what we can survive together. We know how to recognize threats to our family's well-being. And we know that our love for each other is stronger than any campaign against us." William agreed, though he remained vigilant about protecting their family from future betrayals. "The person who did this taught us that we can't assume loyalty from people just because they're part of our extended family or household. But they also showed us how strong we are when we work together to protect each other." Charlotte, now 10 years old, had developed a more sophisticated understanding of the challenges her family faced. She no longer seemed surprised by negative comments at school, and she had learned to respond to them with the confidence that came from knowing the truth about her family. "I told the girls that if they want to know about my mama, they should look at what she actually does instead of listening to gossip," she informed William one day after school. "I said she helps children and families who need support, and that's what really matters." William smiled at his daughter's wisdom and strength. The betrayal that had started with Charlotte's innocent questions about cruel comments had ultimately taught their entire family valuable lessons about loyalty, trust, and the importance of standing together against those who would try to tear them apart. The systematic campaign against Catherine was over, but more importantly, the family had emerged from the crisis with a deeper understanding of their own strength and resilience. They had learned to protect each other not just from external threats, but from the more insidious danger of betrayal from within their own circles. As they moved forward, the royal family carried the scars of the betrayal, but also the knowledge that they could survive even the most devastating attacks on their unity. The truth had been exposed, justice had been served, and their family was ultimately stronger for having faced the crisis together. The gardens of Kensington Palace, which had once felt potentially compromised by the presence of someone working against them, once again became a sanctuary where the family could be themselves without fear of surveillance or judgment. The simple joy of watching their children play freely in their own home had been restored, and with it a sense of security that they would never again take for granted. Charlotte's question about cruel comments had led to the discovery of a devastating betrayal, but it had also led to the protection of their family's future happiness and security. The truth, as painful as it had been to uncover, had ultimately set them free to love and trust each other, without the shadow of hidden enemies working against them from within their own home.